Okay, it's started now. So just to let you know, you're being recorded now. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this at, and welcome. This is the second episode of TEDI Talks, and today we're looking at disability, career change, and what I've called the long game. Now, I want to start things slightly different today. Before we get into definitions, legislation, or practice, I want our viewers to begin thinking about their own career. So, how similar or how aligned is the career that you're in at this moment in time to what you thought you'd be in at 18? And that's just a question to our viewers to get them thinking. And then next, I'm going to quickly introduce someone very, very special. So today I'm here with Will Donald. Will, can you introduce yourself and tell our audience who you are?
So first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you on the TEDi Talks podcast. It's an honour, and looking forward to the next hour or so. So my name's Will Donald. I'm an adjunct professor of sustainable careers and inclusive practice at Liverpool John Moores University, and also a visiting research fellow down at the University of Southampton. So my research, it connects theory with practice, advancing understanding of sustainable careers, employability, career development, and inclusive practice. So drawing on my earlier career as a graduate recruiter in London, and my lived experience as autistic, ADHD, and a dyslexic academic living with chronic health conditions, it lets me bring a distinctive perspective to how people navigate and uh, find their way through changing careers and workplaces. Just a couple more bits from me. I will skip that bit. Um, so in 2024, I was recognised in the Shaw Trust Disability Power 100 for my contributions to education and research. And for the last 2 years, I've been lucky enough to included in the Stanford and Elsevier World's Top 2% of Scientists. And since 2025, I've served as co-editor of Career Development International. There we go. We'll stop there.
Amazing. Isa, such a massive, massive thank you for coming along to our TEDdy Talks podcast. And I'm so happy to have you here. So, Will, for people who haven't come across your work before, can you explain how you ended up in careers and employability?
Uh, yes, absolutely. So actually, a disability had a profound influence on my career. So um, almost overnight, I went from being a graduate recruiter to being bedbound for a year. At that point, I was retired on health grounds and using a wheelchair for managing exhaustion. And that was in 2012. But I wanted to keep contributing to career development. It was really important to me. And so I did a part time PhD 2014 to 2017 at the University of Southampton. And there I was looking at the student perspective of graduate employability. And then a key turning point for me came in 2019. In the November, I became housebound at that point and temporarily lost access to these valuable spaces of knowledge exchange and networking before the COVID-19 pandemic came along and restored that access just a few months later. And unfortunately, those inclusive gains, they were fairly short-lived in the whole. And by 2022, many events had returned to in-person only. And that shift, along with discovering that I was autistic in December of 24, and later combined ADHD in January of 25, that's been a catalyst for my advocacy work and research ever since.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So prior to 2012 and when life changed quite significantly for you, do you think your work was always focused on inclusivity, or do you think that lens and that change in your life gave you a different perspective?
It's really interesting because when I worked for the bank, I led equity, diversity, and inclusion for graduate recruitment across the EMEA or Europe region. So it's always been something that's really important to me. I've always had a strong sense of social justice as well. And I guess part of me's known for a while that I probably was autistic, and that is something that can present in people who are autistic, that they have a strong sense of wanting to look out for other people and a strong sense of fairness and justice and calling out things that are somewhat exclusionary. So a bit of both, really, I think is probably the answer. It's certainly become my more dominant focus of research in the last few years, but it's always been there because you can't talk about employability or careers without talking about these intersectional inclusive aspects, and disability cuts across all other forms of difference and experience.
Absolutely. In your prior answer, you mentioned that COVID gave you a short-term access into what was missing, whereas before you were quite active in the educational space because of your own physical health. And then when just before COVID, you ended up in a wheelchair. Can I ask you, what's been the biggest enabler for including you in these spaces in education? And then I'll ask you afterwards about the biggest barrier.
Yeah, perfect. So the biggest enabler actually is events like this. It's literally saying, Will, we want to hear what you have to say, and we don't care where you are when you say it. And that means a lot. And it's slightly sad that it does mean a lot, because it should be a norm that we go to people where they are and hear their experiences, but that's not always the case. So from an inclusion perspective, I think it's saying, we value you as a human being, we value what you have to say, we value your experience, we want to hear and listen to what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. And then just flipping on the other side, what's been the biggest barrier for you in terms of employability, work in the inclusion space and working in careers?
I think it's almost two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
if that's not too much of a cop-out answer, which is
Okay.
I'll be invited to give a keynote, for example, and I'll say, yeah, brilliant, I'll present online. And they say, no, you have to present in person. I said, well, I'm housebound. I don't make a secret of that.
Yeah.
And they say, no, if you can't come in person, then we'll give it to someone else. And somewhat horribly, when I was at the associate professor level, that happened a lot. The minute I got professor, suddenly there's more flex for, oh, well, we'll have a professor along even if they're not there. But I'm the same person. My theories are the same. It's 1 year difference. And I think the hierarchical titles that we see in academia, especially, but in life more broadly, we need to look beyond those sometimes and look at the value that someone has, regardless of their title, regardless of what it says on the tin. We want to know what they're actually doing and what they stand for as a human being.
I agree there. I do feel like as particularly within academia and the field that we work in, I do feel that unless you've got power or a title after your name or before your name, nobody's interested. And it's a shame because underneath that, when you take away that title, you take away the letters after our name, everything else, and we are the same person. And that's what I always think when I actually am thinking about it quite deeply. I just think it's such a massive shame because as human beings, where is the humanity when we are humans? And people often forget before professor, before doctor, before XYZ, you are who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay,
I also
so
realise this is apt, so I'll pull that
oh,
down, have another
yeah,
half.
please do get comfortable. If you want a cup of tea or coffee, please just let me know because I'm a massive coffee fan. So I've got a couple of questions here. How has disability, particularly your own personal disability, how has it changed the way that you think about your own career?
Oh, it's huge. I think it's really difficult if you don't have experience of living with a disability. And to some extent, even if you're supporting someone else that does, it's not quite the same, but it gives you some insight. But if you're living with it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then a couple of things happen. I think in the first part of that, back in 2012, when I suddenly went from running marathons, leading people up mountains, um, you
Wow.
know, going around the UK recruiting graduates, all the careers fairs, assessment centres. Um, it's so all encompassing that that is kind of your life and your focus. And then suddenly, to not be able to sit up in bed without passing out for a year, to be retired at 25 on health grounds, it was a kind of, okay, right, that's the end of that chapter because there's no way that that's feasible anymore. But it's not the end completely. And I think that was a really major reinvention point for me of having that initial time of, all right, I've lost something. I'm allowed to grieve. I can feel that sense of loss. I can really, mourn a bit for what I did have and what I can't do. But now it's reset time. Let's look at the cards I've got and let's play the hand I've been dealt and let's do something that brings me some joy, keeps my brain active because I can't sit still for very long without needing to do something or focus on something. And so it was a complete pivot. But what's really interesting is I was a project manager and release manager for technology in the bank before I moved into graduate recruitment. And both of those were really valuable for then doing the PhD and the research in academia, as well as the consultancy stuff that I do, because you need project management when you're trying to keep all these different projects in play and working with different people. And my experience of being a recruiter meant I could bring that into academia and have a rarity that I actually had some industry experience alongside what I was studying. I hadn't done undergraduate, master's, PhD career in academia. But more broadly, when supporting other people, it's having that understanding and that belief that everyone has different challenges, everyone has different experiences. And moving away, we'll come to this in a minute, I'm sure, but moving away from that, it's all about me. If I take ownership of my career, I can achieve anything I want. Yes, but, and I think the caveat is really important that there are external factors, there are biases, there are opportunities that are or aren't there for different groups of people, different people within the same group. So a real awareness of just how far we still have to go in the UK, but more broadly in the world, I think. We see we have laws and such, and I think they're the bare minimum, and sometimes they're treated as the tick box to, if we comply with the law, then we're fine. And the law's always reactive because as a social species, we move and then the law catches us up. So I think that's not your aim for this, we're brilliant. That's an absolute bottom baseline of this is what is needed. So I'll stop there because I'm rambling and
No, I found it
reset.
fascinating. No, thank you for that. And the format of these TEDi Talks is it's not planned. I sent you a brief overview, but you probably noticed me go off that based on what you're talking about. And that's how I prefer it to be because I prefer that natural, deeper talk rather than something scripted. So thank you for that. And thank you for being so raw and insightful. I found it fascinating listening to you. So with the theme today being disability career change and the long game, what does a long game mean to you?
Well, I love this particular part. So the long game naturally fits with this idea of a sustainable career ecosystem lens. And if you see me talk about anything, you'll see this come up again and again and again. And
Yes.
for me, it's the career isn't judged by a single job or a single transition. It's whether a person can keep functioning, adapting, and thriving across a career span that these days is often 4 decades or more. So this is actually the organising idea. I'll just segue in briefly for my forthcoming Trotman CDI book, which I use weather as a career metaphor to think through weather elements, seasons, and climate as a way of helping people prepare for and navigating opportunities and challenges over time. And the sustainable career is about the interlink of the person, the context, and time. So indicators of that being health, happiness, and productivity. And that was developed by Professors Beatrice van der Heijden and Ons de Vos. And this back in 2015. It's been the key work that that has informed me, because I started my PhD in 2014. Their book came out in 2015, and that also had the career ecosystem theory from Professor Yuda Barak in the same book. They're the two theories that underpin my general view on these things. So it's a long term, it's about lifelong learning, but it's also about life-wide learning. And this idea that we gain resources and experiences from everything that happens in our life. So from our work, from our hobbies, from our family, from our friends, from all these different settings that we might participate in, they all help us gain resources, which I refer to as employability capital.
Okay, thank you for that. For those who aren't familiar with what lifelong learning and what life-wide learning might mean, can you please elaborate?
Yes, of course. So lifelong learning is perhaps the one we might be more familiar with. It's the idea that our learning accumulates over time. So we go through school, we go through education, we go into the labour market, we might have periods of unemployment, we might change jobs. And that cumulative process over time is lifelong learning. And then life-wide learning, it complements that. So if lifelong learning is looking at time that way, if this shows at all, then life-wide learning is looking at it the other way. So it's looking at this one specific point in time, where am I getting my learning experiences from? So to give an example, at this point in time, I'm doing some editing work, some book writing, some paper writing, some consultancy, some interviews. Each of them bring different things. I'm playing with my daughter, that brings different things. I'm having a coffee with a friend and we talk about different things. And so the cumulative experiences that we get at a single point in time, and take that as a 1 year stint, if you like, that's your life-wide learning. And then lifelong learning is that progression along the timeline. I hope that's not too seminar-like.
No, thank you for that. I always like to think of it as you're talking, I was thinking of a ladder. So lifelong learning is like almost going up the ladder, and that life-wide learning is the experiences that you get while you're on each rank or at each step. So like for example, while you're doing your GCSEs or you're in school, you might have a work placement or you might get a careers fair or somebody coming in, and that's part of that life-wide learning. Then the next step up is A levels or college. So you're going up the ladder, that lifelong learning, you continue learning as you go along life, but that wider learning is everyday experiences that contribute to it. So that's the image that I was getting in my head. But again, I'm quite a visual person, so I like to think of things as image. Yeah. So
Absolutely. And also for young people especially, we've done some studies, Nimi Mohandas, Dr. Nimi Mohandas, who's based in India, and myself, we've done studies looking at the benefits of serious leisure. So where I'm retired, I frame my work as serious leisure. It's serious because it's important, but it's leisure because I choose what I'm doing. And serious leisure is things like your Stebbins came up with this. It's things like your taking part in clubs and societies or doing volunteering, things that you might not think are valuable at the time or as valuable at the time, but often when you're in interviews, that's where your experiences get drawn from. Tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership. Oh, well, I was on the club society for this and I organised this. Oh, okay. And it lets you have experiences you wouldn't get otherwise at that same career stage or education level. You can be treasurer of the Young Enterprise Society, for example, but you probably can't be treasurer or manage the finances for a particular organisation as readily at certain points in life. So just an example.
thank you for that. You've spoken about you having to reset after life has thrown some difficult challenges at you, and then you've had to kind of sit back, think about it, and then reset and then continue going. How do you maintain that mindset where, because with every single person, I often think life has ups and downs. No person's like perfect. Like whatever you see in social media, Instagram and TikTok, people show the good parts. Not often do they show the difficult challenges behind it. I always think of it as like what's the word? Like where you see the top part, but you don't see the parts underneath,
The
where people have
iceberg.
the iceberg. Yeah, thank you for that. There's my ADHD kicking in as well. Yeah, so the iceberg model. So I often think everyone's got it difficult, and at some point, people are going to face challenges with their health, their children, their wealth, partnerships, relationships, marriage, divorce, deaths, and so on. How do you pick yourself? You mentioned you're resetting yourself. What advice would you give to someone who might be watching this thinking, I'm in a similar situation. Life has taken a turning point, and at this moment in time, I've got very little control over what I can do. What advice would you give to that person?
And I think that's really, really important. And the first bit is to try and be kind to yourself.
Yeah,
Um, and I love that you mentioned about social media there, because I'm not in the group that says I'm not entirely of the ban it all, it's all terrible.
yeah,
However, the points that you make there are really the worst of it. That for mental health, for well-being, it's human nature to start comparing ourselves with other people, and we do that all our lives, however much we try not to. I'm very guilty of that as well. I'll be checking my citations and see what other people have got, and it's not a great thing to do because everyone's doing their own race, their own journey in different circumstances at different times. The key is, well, two things actually. In the book, and if you don't mind me just using one example from that,
please do. I'd love
um,
to hear more about your book. Your
I
books, S, plural.
well, I talk about the tornado, and
Yeah,
so the tornado comes in out of nowhere and obliterates everything in its path. You had no notion this was coming. And Professor Jos Ackermans, he refers to these as career shocks, these unexpected events that come in and impact your career. And they can be positive or negative, they can be good or bad, and they can start as one and become the other. So, one of the examples that he uses is you might get a promotion, unexpected promotion, that's good, but then burn out because it came too soon and it's too much work. You weren't able to do it at that point. And I use one the other way, which is, if I can remember, that's right, being unexpectedly made redundant,
yeah,
but then going, okay, what do I want to do? And COVID had this effect on a lot of people. You temporarily had people on furlough, you're temporarily confined to home. And they said, hold on, we're going to reevaluate what life means to us now. Meaning and success has changed. And so people were quitting their jobs and setting up businesses, they were changing careers. And I think the point there is that what can seem as a really bad event at the time, you can rebuild from that and often end up in a better place down the road. So everything's temporary.
yeah,
Um, and more broadly, I say, well, you want to as well get the resources beforehand. So, from an employability capital perspective, you want to get networks and contacts so that when something happens, you've got people that can support you and be there for you and advocate for you and go, hold on, we might be able to get you a job. We know someone here. So, that aspect and the psychological capital as well of, call it the hero elements of hope, self-efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And
yeah.
yes, I know self-efficacy begins with S. I didn't come up with the thing. That was Luthans and Luthans and Luthans, the three with the same name, which a brilliant paper. But even if you get those resources beforehand, as I say in the book, your warm jumper is going to be great. But if a tornado is coming at you, it's not really going to do very much to stop that. So
No.
even if you have resources, there'll come a point where the demands are greater. And again, Demeritri and Baker, they talk about job demands, resources, and there are going to be periods where the demands are higher. And it's accessing career counselling guidance as support and accessing mental health and broader counselling opportunities and framing that as part of a healthy human being experience and not just going to those things at points of crisis or at points of transition. But that liminality space, that space between these big life events, building that process there so that when something happens, you've got that reserve. You've got what Hobful says, that the reservoir, the resource reservoir, so you fill it up and then you can draw on the water resources when you need it.
That's ever so helpful. As you were talking, I was just thinking about the fact that you have to be resilient and you also need to just not go to career counseling or access guidance or support when you're at crisis point. But I also think prevention is better than cure. If you've got them in the bank and you've got them stored, then you know, actually, I can fall back on X, Y, Z and use your networks. Like there've been periods while you're talking, I was reflecting on my own life and my own career. And when I think back to that first question that I asked, I may ask you the same question about if you think back to when you were 18 about where you wanted to end up, like I wanted to be initially, I wanted to become a pharmacist, but I wasn't very good at science at A level or math, so I completely changed it. I was much better at the English side of things. And I was like, okay, I want to work with kids, but I don't know whether I want to be a midwife or whether I want to be a teacher. I ended up down the teaching route because I thought, okay, I'll move out of the UK and I'll be living in the UAE somewhere. Oh, I can hear myself echoing. Second, let me just mute it. Okay, hopefully that's better. That's better. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And I just think life has taken me through so many ups and downs, ups and downs. There's just peaks and blows, and it's very similar for a lot of people. I'm back in education. I've come back to teaching. At the moment, I'm a centre manager of a club for children for after school care and like holiday clubs and so on. But I never thought this is where I'd be. I'm also a consultant. I do that. I'm trying to finish off my PhD, which unfortunately has come to the bottom of my list, but I need to get back up to the top. But at this point, like, I imagine myself, I'd have that doctor title, I'd be in academia. I had so many different goals for myself, but then life kicked in. Like in the middle of it, I had a divorce, messy child battle for my kids, and so on. And I just think life throws a lot of things at you, which you don't plan for, which we don't account for. And you have to have things as a backup and always be prepared. So while you were talking, I kept thinking about the things that I accessed when I was at crisis point. What did I do? I use LinkedIn a lot. At that point, I used to use LinkedIn, but unfortunately now I'm shadow banned, so not many people can access what I'm posting. So for me, that's a bit of a hindrance. But then I think, how can I make my work come out in different ways? So I've come back to myself and thought, okay, I'm shadow banned on LinkedIn. However, I'm still the EDI associate for the CDI. So I'm putting more focus into these podcasts. I'm hopefully hosting each month. I'm trying my best to engage with people within the world of careers and do use other things. So that's a bit of a stumbling block for me. So I'm just relating it back to myself. But I'm wondering, for you at the age of 18, where did you imagine your life to be, and what have been like the stumbling blocks and underneath the iceberg, what's been difficult and what's been the peaks in your life? Oh, are you on mute?
It's always one. Just before that, we should say as well that your excellent book, which is part of the CDI Trotman series, as well, that if people haven't come across, and not being paid to plug that, I genuinely think these things are important, that we read and understand, and we talk to people and have these open discussions. And we might not agree, we might have differences, but we can do that in a respectful way. So that's very important. To answer your question, actually some similarities there. So I wanted to be a doctor. Say, well, you are. Well, yes, but I wanted to be a medical doctor. And that became clearly not going to happen when we had to do dissections in biology. And for anyone that's squeamish like me, I'll not go into too much of it. But needless to say, once you pass out once, it's entertaining for the rest of the pupils in the class. When you do it a few times and have to be told to go and sit outside each time they happen, you probably know that if you can't stand the sight of blood, medical doctor is probably not the profession that's going to work for you. I also happen to be terrible at chemistry and biology A levels, so that was the thing. And that's something I found, and I think also links a lot to autism and ADHD, that there's this spiky profile, and I find I'm very, very good at specific things. and I'm very, very bad at other things. Art, for example. I've always told my daughter how bad I was. We were playing the other day, and she said, "Papa, your drawing is really, really bad." I said, "I know. I've told you this. I don't make any. I'm open about it." She said, "But no, it's really bad. People in my class draw better than you." I said, "Yeah, but this is the thing. There are going to be people that can do things better than you." So for me, searching for what career you want, it's as much about knowing what you don't want to do or can't do as it is knowing what you do want to do, because they inform each other. And that was really helpful for me, that as the options narrowed down, it's like, okay, well, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at business, geography, computing. I could go into any of those options. And even at university, I had options to study geography, management, IT and organizations, which is what I did. So it feels like the film Sliding Doors. So people who aren't familiar, there's a point where, I think it's a train, I haven't watched it for ages, but this idea that there's two or more multiple different paths that key points in life bring you to a particular junction, and you can either go this way, or another way. And it's often felt a bit like that in careers, that at the time, certain decisions might not make sense externally, but over time, the sum of your experiences tend to then inform what you do, especially later on. You don't have to have it figured out in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. You've got time. So try different things. If it doesn't work, try something else. And one more bit, if I can add, if we've got
please,
time for that.
time.
Oh, brilliant. So when I mentioned resilience earlier, and when you were talking about that as well, I remembered, so there's a paper I've written with Dr. Michael Healy. He's out in Australia, and myself. And we look at resilience, and we're a bit critical of it. And we're not the first to do that. Of course, the late great Professor Sultana wrote resilience as one of the four dirty words of the field. And what we do, we try and take the idea, because we like analogies and metaphors, in case you hadn't guessed. We take the idea of going to the gym. Now, the idea is for strength-based training, you go to the gym, you lift some weights, you have temporary breaks in the muscles or the fibers, and they rebuild stronger. But you have to have the rest days between that, because if you keep pushing and you go every day and you keep going, you injure yourself because you haven't had the recovery time to come back. And we look at this in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, and people say, oh, the younger generation, they should be really resilient because they've gone through this hardship, but they haven't had the opportunities in the main to recover from that. It's been one thing, cost of living, housing, cost of education. And so it's that cumulative hit that we sometimes glorify as toxic positivity, or we give this idea that resilience is enough to get us through. Resilience is as much building up over time as we encounter smaller aspects that at the time might feel challenging, so that when we hit these more challenging periods, we have more ability to navigate them. But that doesn't mean that being resilient is the answer and solves the problem. It means that that's part of the equation, and the support networks we have are just as valuable as part of that recovery.
Thank you so much for that.
Second. I'll mute again. There we go.
Thank you. Okay. So, Will, with some of your experience, I know we've spoken about what we've imagined our career path to be at 18, and the journey went on quite similar. I do think that ADHD is definitely a common denominator there in terms of where we thought we'd end. Do you think, had you not had these setbacks in life or these events, do you think you'd be where you are today had they not occurred?
No, absolutely not. I generally don't know where I'd be. But I think it was a really significant moment in life, and like I say, I was um, leading people up mountains, running marathons. I trained. I did a 10-mile run in the snow the morning
Wow.
before I ended up bedbound for a year
No.
in the February of 2012 when we had, I think it was called the Beast from the East or whatever, came in and absolutely froze the UK for a period of time. But you just don't know what life has in store. And this is one of the things when you say to people, oh, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? It's helpful to some extent, but a lot can happen in 5 years. I mean, my PhD that I did part time took 3.5, but that's because I didn't have much else going on. And
Mm.
so, but in that time, had I met, got engaged, and married to my now wife. I had a loss in the family and 2 funerals, various other things that happened during that period of time. And there's no way you could have foreseen those happening or in that same window of time. Um, but I think as well, it's also let me be I used to be quite passive and quite sort of fawning as a way of getting through and just sort of being like, oh, yes, of course, no problem, what, a bit timid. And now, uh, some people probably say I go too far the other way, but I'm I'm much more confident in setting out and saying, look, this is what's needed. Here's the issue, or at least the other way around. Here's the issue, then what's needed. But one of the two. And really advocating not just for myself, but for other people as well. And without that lived experience, and I often use comparisons, like I said before. So I always try and compare it to that year being bedbound and
Yeah.
listening to I love Bruce Springsteen, so Trapped and the lyrics, if we don't get banned for using a short snippet, is I'll teach these eyes to see beyond these walls in front of me, and someday I'll walk out of here again. And I listened to that every single day I was bedbound, and I still listen to it loads. And it's that reminder of, okay, that was like a really, really challenging part, but compare that to now. Don't compare to the running and the racing and the catching across country. Compare that to that point where sitting up in bed you passed out. And so having some kind of anchor and reset is really important. And I keep coming back to that, I think. But no, completely different path now um, to what I ever thought. Both good and bad.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I'm just, could you mute, please?
Sorry, yeah.
No, that's fine. Thank you. So you've spoken about the challenges to your health and the fact that you were once quite active and then your life has completely changed as, like we said, life throws things our way and often we don't expect them, but you just kind of got to go with the flow and it takes a bit of time to adjust and so on. So if there's someone out here listening who may have acquired a disability or their health has changed partway through their career, how can they begin to rethink what comes next without feeling like they're starting from the beginning all over again? You've touched on this before, but is there any advice that you'd give to people?
Yes, I think that last part of that question captures a really important point without feeling like you're starting over again. There's two dimensions to that. One is that everything you've done so far, your life wide learning, your lifelong learning over the years, that has given you networks, opportunities, experience, resources. But on the other side of that, you might have to be starting again. I was going on trains every day around the UK, trying to do that with a wheelchair and get stands for graduate recruitment fairs or stuff like that. It's just not feasible. So I think, see, first of all, if you can, and if you have the financial resources as a backing, stop, take a moment and think, okay, what do I want? What's important to me? What do I want to do? How do I want to have an impact? And then see if there's an opportunity to do that. And that might be pivoting to a different career, but that doesn't mean starting again. And if it does mean starting again, because some careers you have to start at a particular level and work up, is that necessarily a bad thing? As long as the finances cover what you need, and I accept the privilege of that aspect. But I think as well, for me, and for a lot of people actually with disabilities, neurodivergence, you often see them struggle quite a bit in corporate settings. And you see them move out and you see them set up their own organization or work for smaller SMEs with often with other people with similar characteristics. And that's where they can thrive. So find somewhere that gives you the opportunity to be your best, to where the environment lets you succeed and do something you enjoy, because like I say, as the retirement age keeps going up, 40 plus years of this, and it's tough at the moment. I get it that it's not easy, and particularly as you get older, I think the start and end of the career run are really, really tricky at the moment for people to secure opportunities in certain sectors, not all. So just being open to trying something different and judging success on your terms and your criteria, not on how much money do I make, what title do I have. I think we'd probably all be much happier with that.
I think what you've said there is so important. So the first thing that you said was, what's important to me? So you've placed a person at the center of that. And I think that is so important. Where do I want to go? What is in it for me? And I always say you can't pour out of an empty cup. So you have to fill your own cup before anyone else. And like as parents, as mothers, as women, as men, often we're so busy looking after other people's needs that we don't advocate for ourselves. So I think number one, from the last webinar that we did on disability, a few key themes that you've touched upon here, such as advocating and being your own biggest self-advocate. Because if you don't advocate for yourself, you don't tell people your needs, other people, nobody else is going to do it for you unless they know you really well. But even then, I always think you have to tell people what your needs are. What do I want out of life? Where do I want to go? What are my next steps? What will I do to get there? How will I get there? Is there anything more that I need? So a couple of questions that you can begin asking yourself. In my book, I'm not to plug my own book either here, but I have got quite a few toolkits, and I think being reflective is so important. There's times where I've started again from nothing and I thought, okay, I don't want to be doing this forever, but I'll do it for now because it will pay the bills, it will get me going, and it's something, it's a starting point. I don't think necessarily it's a bad thing to start all over again. Last year, if I think back to my life back a year ago, I was moving out of England to Kuwait and I thought, okay, that's it now. I'm going to be out of England and I've got a new job. It didn't work out because the education system there wasn't for my child. So I ended up back in the UK and I had to start again. I've got tenants living in my house. I had to start over in a new city. I had to move away from my family and everyone that I knew and just find my feet in a new town. And for me, that was a challenge. But at the same time, I've been able to reinvent myself, who I am, what I am, and I know what I stand for. And I do feel like with all these changes, I always feel like it's almost like these arrows that shoot you, they just make you stronger, because what doesn't kill you, just it makes you a better person in the long run. And I feel like you have to trust the process. Even if life at the moment may be a little bit dark, it may be a bit gloomy, you have to advocate for yourself and trust the process and know that life does get better. I always think when you hit rock bottom, there's nowhere further below that you can go. So you have to start again, and the only way back up is up. So I think maintaining a positive mindset, but also having a goal in mind is super, super important. Now, we spoke a lot about advocacy and about resilience being quite a dangerous word, which I do feel it is, but at the same time, I feel like you have to have elements of yourself where you have to know you will get through this, and it's just a temporary phase. things will get better and hold on to the faith that things do get better. So from an employer's perspective, inclusion for me isn't just a HR policy. It isn't words. It's it's much deeper than that. We've got lived experience in it. So what role do managers and colleagues play in making the workplace inclusive for people with either visible disabilities or invisible disabilities? How can they make it inclusive?
And I think that's a really important point. I'm actually going to link that to some research I'm doing in Brazil at the moment, which might sound a bit weird. Like, hold on, how's that? But it all links back and shows us just how connected we are. So Professors Bruno Felix, he's based in Brazil, and Sophie Henneken, who's in France. We've looked at the experience of autistic employees in the Bank of Brazil, and we've interviewed their autistic employees and their mentors. And it's quite a relational setting in Brazil, and there's a lot of unspoken things that so it's quite difficult to navigate. And what we see there, and we see this play out across a lot of other institutions in the UK as well, is that organisations are quite good at saying we're really inclusive, and they'll get some people in the door and then use those stats and take photos of them and put them on websites and say, look, we've got this.
Yeah.
But once they're there, again, it's slightly different there. But if they want any kind of reasonable adjustments, they often have to go to court to get the court to tell the employer to do them. And what we found was that it comes down to their manager. If the manager wants to advocate for them, they'll put things like, oh, we should really do this because it's a productivity thing, versus, oh, well, we can't give you a quieter space to work because we don't have that capacity. You can't work from home because of this, or this.
Mm-hmm.
And what we also saw there was that the mentors that they picked were coming from these specific other underrepresented groups, and they were using their advocacy through those groups. So there was a black woman with autism who went to a black women's group at the bank and said, can you help? And they said, yes, but what we have to do is we frame it from the perspective of a black woman, and we can talk about your autism alongside that. So, yeah, perfect, and bring that along. So without going, that's still in peer review, so I won't share too much more of that. But the key bit is that, and the most important bit really, is that the manager makes or breaks the opportunities there, because they're between the policy level at the top and the individual in their team. And it shouldn't be that way, because it comes down to, like I find when I'm trying to get to spaces, does the person know me? Do they like me? Are they inclined to help me? And that feels wrong, and it's always an individual isolated thing. So what we need is more co-design. So bringing people into the conversation at the start to say, how do we design workplaces where everyone can do well? But also, I think we often see training for managers. It's our 1 year annual training day, or it's Disability Awareness Week or something. And you can't use that strategy as a long-term approach, because, as I put in my other book, and I won't say the name to avoid plugging too much stuff, but I don't believe it's possible to have a fully inclusive event or conference or setting, because you have this concept that Silverman calls access friction. Different people need different things, but you listen and you learn and you look at different ways of bringing people together. And the minute someone says, oh, we already are inclusive, that's not a good look, because inclusivity isn't a destination, it's an ongoing process. And I think too many organizations do the once a year check-in, go, have we got enough people to do well in this ranking? Excellent. Let's do a press release about how we're brilliant with this. Let's do an interview with someone that has a visible disability rather than someone who has a non-visible disability. And I think that group also get really underrepresented when it comes to this kind of thing. It's like, well, where's the wheelchair? Well, you can have ambulatory people who can walk sometimes, need wheelchairs on us, but it's not about the where's the wheelchair, do we have a ramp? It's about the whole plethora of different experiences that people have and different needs people have, and making them feel included, because when we feel included and valued, we do our best work. If someone makes me feel included and valued, I'll metaphorically run through walls for them. I'll get in the wheelchair and try and drive at it. But if someone doesn't make me valued, I find it harder to want to do my best work for them. I'll do what's needed eventually, and so having people, a workforce, and individuals that are valued, they'll do the best work and they'll bring the best ideas. Your clients are going to be represented by individuals who work for you. So the people that have invisible disabilities, who are deaf, for example, they exist in the population. If they exist in your workforce as well, they can inform your designs, your customer service, your products, so that they align better with the needs of the real world. So everyone benefits. It's this interconnected, interdependent nature of the ecosystem. Yeah, that one in there
Absolutely.
again.
It's on a human level, but it's also on that business case level where inclusivity benefits everyone. And this is something that often businesses, yes, they might do their training, they might do their CPD and whatever, but that's nothing. That is literally a tick box exercise. Say, yeah, we're compliant, and that's it. I always feel like to look at whether a business is truly inclusive, you don't go to the managers, but you look at the workforce. Are the workforce feeling valued? Are they feeling like the work is meaningful? Are they going home satisfied? And is there a culture of psychological safety? And if there's not, where people feel on edge or they have to put on a mask at work and there's someone else outside of work and they're not being their authentic selves, it's very, very difficult. There's often workplaces that are quite toxic where there's issues to do with power, leadership, and so on, or where leadership can be quite fragmented. So we spoke in the webinar about having a successful career, and now success can look different for each person. Some people are defined by money, they're more motivated by finance. However, do you think we could redefine what we mean by career success? That flexibility, well-being, autonomy, and being able to stay in meaningful work, is that important or just as important as salary and promotion? Or is the finance side more important? What's your opinions on that?
So that's another really interesting question. I did some research just after the COVID-19 pandemic, actually, and I compared people that graduated in 2008 during the global financial crisis, my cohort, and people that graduated in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. And it was really interesting. At the start, there was, we'll take any job just to get a job because it's chaos, and we'll work out what we want to do later. And we'll try and get as much money as we can. And the focus is that we don't care if we have to commute, we don't care if it's long hours, we just want any job, save as much money as we can. And then as time progressed, the 2008 cohort, they suddenly said, well, actually now, after how many years, more important for us, if we can work flexibly, hybrid, remotely, without having long commutes, we want time with family, we want flexibility for caring responsibilities, we want somewhere where we feel valued and where we can make a difference. And so it's like most things. I think money's obviously important, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Hertzberg's hygiene factors, you need some kind of financial resources to be secure and safe. But what we tend to find past a certain point is going more than that doesn't really make a significant difference. Particularly in the current economic climate, talking to people and sort of saying, well, there's such a divide now between rich and poor that, you know, even if you earn a bit more, doesn't really make a huge difference to quality of life once you've been able to cover the basics of housing, food, health. So I think there's a general move, and we're certainly something I'm seeing in younger people I'm speaking to at the university level at the moment, which is we kind of want to do something that is valuable to us. And because we've got so much student debt, even though it's not technically debt, but that's viewed as debt, and because the cost of living is going up so much, because house prices have gone up so much, they're not so much the kind of things we're aspiring to at the moment. We're looking more at, can we make a meaningful difference? Can we contribute to climate issues? Can we contribute to sustainability more broadly? And not everyone, of course,
Yeah.
but there seems to be a slight movement towards that. Yes, we need money, but actually the amount of money we need now to have the same opportunities as the previous generation is so much higher that actually we'll revalue what we think is important. Do we want to work 60 hours a week just so we can rent somewhere in the middle of London? Well, maybe not so much anymore. Maybe, and people looking at that entirety as well, it's not just your headline salary, it's what's your cost of living to be there and to commute there as well. So yeah.
I think so important to a couple of points that you touched upon there, the cost of living financially, but also the cost of living to your family, to your well-being, whether you get enough time, because yeah, you can be working long hours, but where's that quality time with your family? I feel like people now, especially with social media and that boom in it, where people are communicating more, they're beginning to voice their opinions a lot more, and we're tapping into other people's lives. So we're constantly comparing whether it's done by design or whether it's done just coincidentally. We can tap into other people's lives, and I feel like that's may had a massive impact on job satisfaction, what it means to be happy in a career. And a lot of people, especially this next generation, they're in careers that we wouldn't have even dreamed of when I was younger, and that maybe didn't even exist, like content creator and so on. And I feel like people are definitely being more creative. So I've got a question here from a careers practitioner listening, no, for a careers practitioner listening to us today. What's one thing that they could do from tomorrow to make their practice more inclusive for everyone, whether they've got visible disabilities or invisible?
And again, that's a great question. I did have an answer to this at the keynote that I gave, and it's currently escaped my mind. But more broadly, I think it's finding out where people are at the current point in time and meeting them there. So, where are you now? What do you need? How can I support you? And let's partner together, because it's all about relationships and trust. And meeting people where they are is the first step, because and letting them have ownership of their process. It's something I do with the employability capital growth model, that it's about supporting them to fill in their worksheets and have ownership of where they're going. Because if someone goes, you need to do this, 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 and this, you go, all right, maybe, maybe not, whatever. But if you come up with the ideas with the support, you've come up with them, you own them, you're more likely to do them. So that's not one thing, but it's one related thing.
No, absolutely brilliant advice. I often say that about meeting people exactly where they are, because you can't meet them where they were yesterday. You can't meet them in the future. You can only meet them where they are in the present as they come to you. And once you built up that relationship, that transactional one where you're giving, you're listening, you're taking, you're using that information that they're giving you to build on the topic, and you begin to build a relationship with them. After that, only then I feel like once you create that psychological safety, can they actually be open and say to you, this is what I want, this is where I want to go, and then you can offer that advice and support to them in terms of what the next pathway may be and what it may look like, and support them and guide them. Well, I think such an important answer that you've given there, and something I often reiterate in all of my webinars and all of my work, So a massive thank you for that. I'm going to end with a final question for you. So we've spoken about barriers, we've spoken about enablers. What do you wish somebody had told you earlier on in your career? So if you can go back to 21-year-old Will, what's advice that you would give to him?
It's probably the recording of the advice I give to a lot of people I support, which is you don't have to have it all figured out now. Life's long. It seems like you have to have this. Some people will go down a particular route and they might get to a manager role in 5 years. They might be an executive in 10 years. Other people will go traveling. Other people do that. But try different things. And if you're not happy in a situation, don't feel you have to stay there just to get a length of time on a CV. Look for other opportunities and sunk cost fallacy. Don't stay somewhere just because you've invested a few months in that particular organization. The naivety in young Will was, oh, well, I can change the culture, I can change the setting, I can change the organization, so I'll stay. And the turnover increased and more people left. And I should have got out early before
Mm.
it impacted my health in the way it did. So staying somewhere and expecting it to change, it can, but that's going to be a 3, 5, 7 year process. Things are pretty glacial in many places. So don't be afraid to say, all right, when I interviewed, I thought this was going to be a really good fit. It's not. I'm going to go and look for something else. Don't be afraid to do that. Employers will hate me for saying that, but they get, as someone said to me when I was on the graduate scheme, an employer gives me money at the end of the month, and I've worked for them for that month, and we're level. No one owes anyone anything. So after that, and that kind of mindset shifts, like, oh yeah, that's a fair point actually. So yeah, um, don't don't stay somewhere just because you're unhappy. Sorry, just because you feel you have to if you're unhappy, and that goes for all dimensions of life. If you have the opportunity to do something about it, and not everyone does, of course.
I think that's such a golden nugget. I always think the days are long, but the years are so short. Yes, we have a long life ahead of us, but you don't know what's around the corner. And it's a bit like parenting. While you're in that moment, the days are so long, especially with like a newborn phase and toddler phase. And then like now got a 13-year-old. I just think, oh goodness, where's his life gone? Like literally, yes, he's a baby today. In the blink of an eye, he's taller than me. And I also applied that same philosophy to jobs, to careers, to life. The days are long, the years are short, so be happy and content while you're doing it. And if you're not unhappy, leave. A job does not define you. I remember when I quit teaching in my first year, um, I thought my life was over. Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm a failure, and so on. Like, why couldn't I do it when all my peers could continue? And it just wasn't for me at that point in my life. And for me, I remember thinking in my head, there must be something wrong with me. And it's like the medical model and the social model of disability. Is the thing missing in a person, or is it in society? It's only as I've gotten older I realized actually it wasn't me, it was a culture, the it was a social aspect of it, and that school wasn't for me. But I've gone on to teach, I've loved it again after many years of being like, no, I wouldn't go back. So I always think life has a funny way of teaching you lessons, and I feel like every single opportunity is either a blessing or a lesson. Don't see it as anything other than that. And try, I know it's difficult and it's easier said than done, but do try and be optimistic and see the positive, see the light in every situation. And we don't know where we're going to end up. We don't know what's around the corner. That's the unpredictability of life. We can plan and plan and plan, but ultimately you go where you're meant to be. I'm a huge believer in fate and destiny, and you can work hard, you can have everything all everything in set up for you, but sometimes life will take you in different directions. So I always feel like one piece of advice that I would give to everyone listening out here is be flexible, have your plans, but be adaptable. And if they change, don't see it as a negative. Maybe there's a blessing in it.
100%. That's the key. It's the idea that If you think of a sailing metaphor, you can always tag course and change course. You define where you're going. And if you're going in the wrong direction, there's no benefit in going there quicker because you're going to have to come back anyway. So you may as well change tack. Same with someone reading a map and going, oh, I know where we are. It's like, no, you don't. You don't. Just say you don't. That's fine. Rather than walk another mile in the wrong direction and go, oh, we're now over here. We should be over there. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Just being humble enough to admit that sometimes a pathway isn't for you and to move on from it. I feel like every experience that we go through in life is, like I said, is either a learning curve, a blessing, or something that you can reflect upon later. But Will, thank you so, so much for your time. It's been amazing. And I just want to thank our audience for listening in and for you for your time in particular. We've touched upon a lot of points that were relatable, and you've spoken about your career, life events, changes that have happened, things that have been where you've been in control, and other times where life has taken over and you've had to adapt. Now, I wish everyone had that same mindset as you, where they've sat with it, they've sat in that situation, and then they've reflected and been like, okay, so what can I do now? I'm in this situation. Where do I go from here? And turning something quite difficult into something quite positive. I feel like it's going to be really inspiring for our viewers and for those listening in to hear it directly from yourself. So, massive, massive round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I'm going to stop recording now. And thank you to everyone for tuning in.